bar was moving at full throttle, and Morrison's "Keep your eyes on the road, your hands upon the wheel" was moving through the smoke and keeping Sandy's mind from completely drifting. She wondered if she'd recognize him, if she'd remember that silky black hair and be able to distinguish it from the others. She didn't really understand why she was here, but there was something in those long brown fingers of her own brown fingers that had burned, and she knew that he would be here again. She'd parked her car right off of Federal, and even though she knew that her car could be unlocked with a coat hanger, she had slammed her door and walked straight into the black. "Hey, girl," the men in the corner said over the noise, but she only smiled and moved, scanning the horizon of human faces. She knew almost all of them to hear, most of them men who yelled, "Bro!" and "Hey, cousin," every night of the week. These were the men who laughed hard and slapped their record-breakingly flat Indian asses whenever somebody told a really good one. Their "Hey, girls" followed her all through the bar, ending in choked laughter and long gulps from bottles of Bud. In the bathroom, she held her shivering hands to her face and pulled bright red lipstick out of her purse and smoothed it onto her lips, though they didn't really need it. A woman started cussing in one of the stalls, and she ignored her. She smiled at her reflection. No matter what, she would find him, and he would continue to say the things that he'd said last night, and she would be beautiful with him, her long hair covering his body and his hands covering her body, covering everything. She smiled quietly again into the distorted mirror before walking out. Her eyes black, her hair black, her skin brown, face nothing more than a reflection. She walked out into the bar, and smoke hit her like a wall. She lit a cigarette and coughed thickly. She touched her face, feeling for a smear of lipstick. If only I could be perfect for his hands. Walking from the restroom, she bumped into someone whose face she couldn't see. She looked back at it quickly and sharply, hoping, but it wasn't him. It said, "Excuse me, baby," and she looked a little closer. But no, she was pretty sure that it wasn't him, and she moved on, suddenly feeling a little sleepy. She scanned the room, her eyes calculating, subtracting the faces that appeared before her. The faces just didn't seem to make sense, even though she recognized them, knew their names. There was a girl she and her friends called Rez Freak, and there was Uncle. There was always an Uncle. He waved, and she put her hand up briefly. She saw her girls at one end of the bar, drinking and playing pool, eyeing men with drunken precision. They saw her and waved her over. She moved drowsily over to them, her hands moving up to her lips again, checking, always checking, to make sure they hadn't missed something. One of them said, "What's up, Maria? Looking for Mr. Wrong?" And she laughed. Her friends talked. She nodded. Her hands slid down her gray-black jeans over and over under the fluorescent lights. Her friend Jeannie pressed herself against the wall, smiling, while Carrie and Bobby pressed themselves against the pool table, their sticks moving over the velvet like magic. His hands. Her friends laughed, and she opened her mouth. She shook a little and went up to the bar, ordered a beer, and turned around. The bar was an ocean of skins, black hair rolling like the sea, over and over each other. Everyone was laughing, and the drink she was holding sweated coldly into her hands. Everything blurred for a moment and then came into focus. She shook her hair into her face and looked down. Nothing made sense in here, and that was okay. That's why she always came. She laughed a little and watched the ocean. She closed her eyes and drank and sat for a long time. Finally, though, she spotted him. Her heart ached, and she pulled her hair further out of her eyes and looked directly at him. He saw her. She smiled and walked lazily back to her friends, their laughter whirling smoothly over their cigarette smoke. She watched them playing pool and telling jokes and saw that they were beautiful with beer in their hands and sex in their eyes. She looked over at him. He looked back. He took his time. He took it because it was one of the few things he could take without asking. He moved among his friends carefully, his hands guiding the stick with love. Her eyes moved over the haze, moved over his hair, and rested only when looking into her friends. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see that he was winning, or trying to, for her. She laughed loudly and he shot another look in her direction. He moved stealthily around the table, her eyes burning into the back of his head. The waitress came by and she ordered again, her hands relaxing around the neck of a bottle. Jeannie whispered something in her ear and pointed just a little with her lips. She stared abstractly into the bar, her eyes focusing on nothing. The only thing she could see, after a few minutes of really looking, was the restroom door and the people moving like shadows in front of it. She turned to say something to Jeannie, but she was gone. The room swayed gently and she with it. The door to the restroom moved closer and she thought she would pass out, but when she opened her eyes, she was standing. She hadn't even moved. She looked over at him again. He'd finished his game and was talking with his friends. He smiled, his eyes swerving recklessly in her direction, just a little. Oh God, he was a crazy-ass skin, but he was the one. She smiled again and he smiled back, his right hand moving through his hair like promises. She could feel her body thrown with this gesture and everything began to move faster around her. She smiled yet again and he started over. She watched him walking through the bar, his legs working in time to the music, his hands straying to his hair again. Her friends were whispering all around her, but she had no idea what they were saying. She thought of the tree that she always passed on her way to work every day, the one she called the gossip tree, because it was the one where all the birds came to, and the one that all of the cats in the neighborhood were always hanging around. There was something about that tree that she had to remember, something important. She thought she heard laughter from the group of used-up men sitting in the corner, but she couldn't be sure. The whispering from her friends reached a heightened pitch, and she felt suddenly like she was someone else. And so she bit the bottom of her lip as he reached her and looked into her eyes, seeing that other person, seeing himself. "Hey, girl," he said, and she nodded. She ran her hands down her jeans one more time. Her eyes flitted to the restroom door. The shadows were gone, and only her face remained, looking back at her, but she really didn't understand how. She talked with him, thinking about the fact that they were both here every night, saying all the necessary things. He continued to pull his hand through his hair until he pulled it through hers, and they both started staring at the exit door. Somehow that door was the reason why she was here, was the reason she had drove all the way down here, and when she went through it, there would be no turning back. She ran her hand on the right side of his face, feeling the bristle burn her fingers. They were about to move, and she felt the shadows move a little inside of her. But this was right. He had been waiting for her. He was here every night. One night, he'd been sitting in the corner without his friends. Another night, he'd been standing by the bar, his hands moving a little just to the music. And one night, he'd been waiting in the alleyway. They clasped hands and started to walk toward the door. She looked into his eyes. Sometimes his face changed, and this confused her, but he was always in the same Indian bar on every Indian night, dreaming the same Indian dreams.